Welcome to the 2019 Breakfast at Blake Reunion Edition. My name is Dion Crushan, class of 1988. It's a pleasure to be here today. What a great morning it is to honor some special alumni. But before we do that, let me share with you a little bit about the weekend. We had a great showing yesterday at the Golden Bears Luncheon. We had a good number of alumni touring the building, talking to teachers, meeting students. It's always fun at the upper school where I work to see alumni coming through. I want to comment also that this morning, I think, our youngest member in the group, or the youngest student, is Hugo Dayton, class of 32. And of course, I think everyone in the room probably knows George Bodem, who we are honoring also today, class of 54. It's quite a span this morning. You probably know this evening there's the the homecoming football game. All of you are welcome, of course, to come out and see the team. I think they're undefeated this year. Is that correct? Thank you, Nick. It's a lot of fun seeing such an excellent team out on the field performing at a high level. That wasn't actually the case in the 80s when I was playing. I'd like to just take a few seconds to recognize some alums who have been lost the past year. We'll just take a moment of silence, please. You do have a program on your table which lists those alumni who are being honored in memoriam. Take a moment of silence. Thank you. A number of years ago, I had an opportunity to host some students from South Africa. It was a relationship we had with a school. And part of their visit here at Blake, I was kind of the Julie McCoy from Love Boat, the kind of social director. And I took them around to various places, museums, and different institutions in the Twin Cities. And I was able to bring them to the governor's mansion when Governor Dayton was still serving. And one thing that was really neat about that day was, one, wasn't that easy to get in to see the governor, but we were able to, much to the surprise and excitement of our students from South Africa. I had never been into the kind of the chambers where the governor received visitors. And one thing I noted that day was how gracious Governor Dayton was and knowledgeable. These students from Cape Town had excellent questions for our governor, and he had excellent responses, and it was really neat to just be a part of that and to see up close how he could welcome visitors and also graciously and very thoughtfully, from a well-informed position, respond to their questions. It was just a really neat experience for me. Just thought I'd share that with you this morning. I'd like to welcome our head of school, Ann Stavney, up to the podium where she will recognize our 3 alumni honorees this morning. And after they receive their awards, as you know, we will hear a little bit from the governor. Dr. Stavney?
Good morning, and it's wonderful to see all of you here bright and early in our new dining commons space. It's fabulous to open the school year with this new dining commons and also to hold Breakfast at Blake here for the very first time. We hope to have many more breakfasts here in the future. So I'm pleased to start with our Alumni Awards by introducing our Alumni Athlete of the Year, Kelly Corcoran Smith. Where is Kelly? Right over there. Wonderful. Okay. Yes. Kelly is class of 1998. He began at Blake in 8th grade after his family moved to Minneapolis from North Dakota, so he could further pursue his skating ambitions. At Blake, Kelly would skate at least an hour before school every morning and 2.5 hours after school every day, supplementing his ice time with ballet and gym workouts. He was involved in the a cappella singing group, the Blakers Dozen, as well as the Glee Club. Throughout his time at the upper school, his leadership, dedication, and talents were recognized with several Blake Awards for students, including the Creative Arts Award for choral music and the Spirit of the Blake School Award. Today, Kelly is a professional figure skating performer. He's a choreographer, a stylist, a director, and a producer. He is a 3-time U.S. figure skating gold medalist and a silver medalist in pairs. He is also a 5-time Midwestern sectional champion and competitor, a national collegiate competitor, and Minnesota state champion. He has skated professionally for many national and international touring shows. He's helped direct several televised skating specials for NBC Sports, and he has coached and mentored up-and-coming skaters, including some current Blake students. Kelly graduated from the University of Denver, where he was the first president of the school's intercollegiate skating team. After touring and performing, he returned and served as the university's first head figure skating coach. Blake's Alumni Athlete of the Year honors those who were active in athletics at Blake and who continued and continue to excel in athletic endeavors beyond Blake. Kelly, we honor you today with this citation. The Blake School recognizes Kelly Corcoran Smith for your outstanding career in figure skating as a nationally recognized competitor, performer, creator, and leader. Your profound and continued dedication to the sport and art of skating has advanced the field and inspired thousands. Congratulations, Kelly. It's my pleasure to present you with the 2019 Blake Alumni Athlete of the Year Award. So, come on up. I'd like to introduce next our Jenny Stevens Hagen Spirit Award winner, George Bodem, class of 1954. George's impressive involvement in Blake can be traced back to his time as a student. He played varsity football, baseball, and hockey, sang in the Glee Club, and played string bass in a band with classmates. He swam on an intramural team for Blake, and he went on to swim for Dartmouth College. Today, George serves as a Blake 1954 alumni class representative. His past service includes alumni board member from 2011 to 2017, alumni board president from 2014 to 2016, and member of our alumni campaign committee from 2017 to 2018. School records show that since 2003, George has attended, okay, wait for it, George has attended 126 Blake events. Woo! In addition to all his formal service, he also volunteers in the classroom. He and his wife Mary have 2 grandchildren at Blake. Zoe is an 8th grader and Emmy is a 5th grader. And I don't know if George knows this, but our own Blake teachers and staff affectionately refer to him as Grandpa George. The Jenny Stevens Hagen Spirit Award honors alumni who have devoted extraordinary time and energy to Blake, who have served as a stalwart enthusiast for the school, and who have promoted, attended, and vigorously supported alumni involvement in school events. We honor George today with this citation. The Blake School recognizes George Bodom for his outstanding service to the school as an inspiring leader, as a dedicated volunteer, and as a warm and enthusiastic presence in our community. Congratulations, George. It's my pleasure to present you with the 2019 Jenny Stevens Hagen Spirit Award. It is my pleasure to introduce our 2019 Outstanding Alumnus of the Year, Governor Mark Dayton, class of 1965. Perhaps it's not surprising that a former governor and U.S. senator would show strong leadership skills as a student. This is certainly true for our award recipient. At Blake, he was captain of the golf team, co-captain of the hockey team, and named an outstanding leader of the senior class. He received awards for leadership, as well as scholastic and academic achievement awards. He earned 9 varsity letters, was an all-state hockey goalie for Blake, and I believe his son Eric is wearing his jersey today, and he went on to play for the men's team at Yale University. During his 40-year career in public service, Governor Dayton served Minnesotans as Commissioner of Economic Development, as State Auditor, United States Senator, and Minnesota Governor. As our state's 40th governor from 2011 to 2019, he helped Minnesota lead the nation's economic recovery from the 2008 recession, adding over 316,000 jobs and converting a $6 billion deficit into repeated budget surpluses. He kept his campaign promises to increase education funding every year. Because of his vision and leadership, Minnesota provides free all-day kindergarten to 5-year-olds and has greatly expanded funding for early childhood education. After 41 years of public service, Governor Dayton retired from office earlier this year, making him Minnesota's longest-serving statewide official. Upon leaving office, he said in an interview, I'm quoting, "Public service is about making a difference in people's lives." Governor Dayton has 2 adult sons, Eric, class of 1999, and Andrew. He has 2 grandsons, Hugo, who you've just heard saying the words pineapple up here. He's a Blake kindergartner, and his younger brother, George. Governor Dayton currently lives in Minneapolis, and for the first time in 50 years, he is unemployed. Right. And happy about it, I think. Blake's Outstanding Alumnus of the Year Award honors a member of the alumni community who has demonstrated outstanding leadership, achievement, and influence in their field and community. We honor Governor Dayton today with this citation. The Blake School recognizes Mark Dayton for outstanding leadership at the local, state, and national level, for a commitment to making a difference in people's lives, and for a dedicated career in public service that spans 4 decades. Congratulations, Governor Dayton. It's my pleasure to present you with Blake's 2019 Outstanding Alumnus of the Year Award. So, Governor Dayton, I will now hand the stage over to you so you can present your Breakfast at Blake address. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank the Blake Alumni Board for this award. Congratulations to you, George, you, Kelly. And thanks to all of you for showing up at 7:30 in the morning to acknowledge us. In my retirement, 7:30 breakfasts have become few and far between. It's one of retirement's virtues. But I'm delighted to get up early this morning for such a special occasion, and I'm grateful to all of you for doing so as well. I'm joined, as was just said, by 4 wonderful members of my immediate family, 3 of whom have their own Blake credentials. My son, Eric Dayton, is a graduate of the Blake class of 1999, 20 years ago. He's embarrassing me by wearing my old hockey jersey. He was a hockey goalie as well. It's much harder being the parent of a hockey goalie than being the goalie. My daughter-in-law, Corey Ayler Dayton, from the class of 2000. My grandson Hugo has been said is currently the class of 2032, and my grandson George is prospectively in the class of 2035. I asked Eric what was going to happen when George runs out of fruit to eat. He said, that'll be your sign to finish up. Also on my table, I'm going to introduce my indispensable right-hand person, Marone Melkin, and also Corey's indispensable right-hand person, Emma Lemke. So what role did the Blake School play in preparing me for my career in public service? Well, first you have to remember that Blake in the 1950s and 60s was a very different school from what it is today. There were no students of color. None at all. Until thanks to my grandmother Dayton's scholarships, 3 African American boys were admitted in 1964, the fall of my senior year. There were also no girls at Blake. Many were sequestered over at the Northrop Collegiate School in Minneapolis. Decades later, during my son's school years, I saw how much more natural and healthy their lives were in co-ed schools. Corey and Eric started dating when she was a freshman at Blake and he was a sophomore. I can hardly remember even having a date during my high school years. I followed at Blake with 4 years at all-male Yale University. Thus, my social development began about a decade later than Blake students today. Maybe you should make that 2 decades later. Back then, Blake was solidly and stolidly conservative. Conformity was the rule, which the faculty and administration enforced, and to which most students subscribed. Those who didn't usually departed. But that consistent enforcement of conservative values established the foundation of my social conduct, which was crucial to my navigating later through countless political minefields. Someone once said in another context, to become formless, first master form. Well, the content of my politics has often been quite different from Blake's then conservative norm. I remained rooted in the code of conduct that I learned there. At my Blake, you didn't cheat and you didn't lie. You didn't brag or claim credit you didn't deserve. You treated everyone with respect. You stood up when George needs more fruit. You treated everyone with respect. You stood up when older people entered the room. Later, as a politician, I stood up when anyone entered the room. I developed a sense of responsibility to my friends, my classmates, and my school. As a result, I did things for Blake that I would never have done just for myself. I had no desire to play football. To be a good football player, you have to be big, strong, and fast. I was none of the 3. But our team needed live bodies, and since I did qualify in that category, I made the team. Before my first varsity game, our coach, Bill Glenn, pulled this 150-pound center aside and said, "Mark, tonight the guy lined up from across you will outweigh you by 105 pounds, which he did. Fortunately, he closely resembled the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. My main concern was not let him fall on top of our ball carrier or on me. Blake introduced me to elections and to one honorable practice which I soon discarded. My 3rd grade teacher said it was wrong to vote for yourself in a class election. I followed that edict for as long as we voted by raising our hands in front of the teacher. When we switched to secret ballots, I sinned and continued sinning for the next 65 years. Ted Kennedy once told me that perseverance was a prerequisite for success in seeking elective office. He said it was not a guarantee of success, but it was usually a requirement for success. I first learned that lesson in 6th grade at Blake, in the election for student council president of the lower school. It was announced in an all-school assembly that 2 classmates and I were tied, requiring a runoff. After that balloting, we were all told that the other 2 boys had been elected co-head boys. I swallowed my embarrassment and disappointment, but persisted. 5 years later, I was elected head boy at the upper school. Years later, I lost my first elections for both U.S. Senator and Governor, but I persisted. Finally, and most importantly, I had ingrained in me by both my school and my family the moral responsibility of leadership. Our school anthem back then concluded, Blake School, sing her praises, keep her honor bright. Pass the torch to those who follow with an undimmed light. But where does Blake's honor come from? Or the honor of any institution? After all, the Blake School by itself is only a name on a group of buildings, which might have impressive architecture, house great sports facilities, and offer advanced IT. But those buildings by themselves can't endow a school with honor. Blake's honor comes from the people associated with it: teachers, administrators, students, parents, and alumni. That institutional honor cannot be acquired overnight. It accumulates from all those individuals' honorable achievements over the years. It is perpetually enhanced or tarnished by the actions of people associated with it. My alma mater, Yale University, was recently dishonored when it was learned that its women's soccer coach had accepted a $400,000 bribe to raise the admission of a girl who didn't even play soccer. The disclosure also raised serious doubts about the veracity of Yale's entire admissions process, not to mention the practice of hiring a man to coach a women's varsity team. Yale's reputation was good enough to survive that disgrace, but honor is nothing to take for granted. Through enough malice or neglect, it can be squandered and lost. Once lost, it is much harder, sometimes impossible, to regain. In the political arena, governments, states, and even entire countries can gain honor or lose it. Consider the behavior of our current President of the United States and its effects on our country's standing with our own citizens and with the world. The President of the National Farmers Union, representing some 200,000 family farms, recently said that, quote, it will take decades to reverse the damage caused by President Trump. He has offended the leaders of pretty much every ally we have on earth. It's going to take much different behavior from future presidents to repair this damage. For 14 of the past 18 years, I've been incredibly fortunate to serve Minnesota as a senator and governor. I have thus had the chance to play some small roles in some very big events. On September 11, 2001, I was in the Senate office building adjacent to the U.S. Capitol, which would have been demolished if courageous passengers had not brought down United Flight 93. I've been to Iraq 3 times and saw how right 23 of us senators were to vote against the 2002 Iraq War resolution. I've been to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Korea's demilitarized zone, Israel, Egypt, and Jordan, to mention a few. I've traveled through China 7 times, from Shanghai to Lhasa, Tibet. I've seen the world we live in become ever more interdependent and vulnerable. Anyone who thinks we make ourselves more secure by threatening and bullying other countries is seriously deluded. The world's survival will require much more cooperation and collaboration among nations, and they need to be led by the United States of America. It will not be quick or easy for our country to regain throughout the world the honor that has been lost. I just hope and pray that this quest for redemption begins sooner rather than later. In closing, I've always said that hockey enabled me to survive childhood and adolescence. But so did Blake. Through my ups and downs, my successes and failures, Blake was a refuge from other dysfunctions, a testing ground, and a proving ground. I owe a debt of eternal gratitude to an exceptional teacher, Betty Jo Ogren, who helped a new to the school third grader overcome his initial fears and isolation. Other teachers and administrators encouraged me, supported me, and taught me by their examples, like Richard Van Santford, who for 5 years was my Latin teacher and hockey coach, and who died of a sudden heart attack during the final minute of the last hockey game in my senior year. Van should have been home sick in bed that day, but we had a game to win for the league championship. His ultimate devotion to our team and our school was a model of heroic sacrifice, which I have tried to emulate, not to death, but through life. Now the time has come for me to pass the torch to my two wonderful sons, Eric and Andrew, my fabulous daughter-in-law, Corey, and their generation. I hope that I've kept it bright. Thank you.
I'm sure there are a few folks in the audience who might have questions, and we do have maybe about 10 or 12 minutes for Q&A. Governor Dayton, are you going to want to sit or are you going to stand? Okay, great. We do have microphones, so if there's two microphones here. Does anyone have a question for the governor?
I just want you to know it's not that hard to get in to see me now.
I'll make an appointment.
If anybody,
I'll bring students with.
stop by.
Hi, Mark. I'm Pam Witcher, and I work at the Five Swans in Wayzata. And it was begun by the Ogrens, and Betty Jo Ogren, your third grade teacher, coveted the letter you wrote to her about her having been the best teacher you ever had. And she framed it, and it was on her wall in her bedroom, and she talked to everybody about that. And she was very, very proud of you. I just wanted you to know that.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
You talked about the need to cooperate, and part of the challenge is getting stories or people who have different ideas about the same kind of data. So how do you recommend bridging some of the increasingly widening divides?
Well, we've had widening divides in this country for our lifetime. You know, back in the War for Independence, you had family members who were Tories supporting the British, other family members who were dying for our freedom. Civil War, same thing. So it's not unusual for us to have differences of opinions among people. The problem we have now is that people don't talk to one another, they don't listen to one another. They make speeches for the internet, for talk radio, whatever, and people listen to people they already agree with. So it just reinforces the polarity and the differences that people have, and there's not a willingness. In fact, there's a penalty if you're reasonable and rational and try to mediate, come together. You'll have a primary opponent in the next election, somebody to your extreme, from the left or the right. I don't have the answer because we're not going to be able to turn back technology, and everybody has access to the internet and a chance to express themselves, but we need role models. We need people who are able to hear other people's differences and to be responsive to that, not necessarily agree, but be responsive and set an example of how you can conduct dignified discourse, which unfortunately is the opposite of what's going on now. So it starts with leaders and role models who will exemplify that kind of behavior, and then hopefully it catches on.
I worked in DC out of college and worked in public policy and think it's an incredibly honorable profession. My boys know Benghazi and Trump and politics today. What do we say to young people like my kids to say that public service is an honorable thing. It isn't all this chaos and polarization, that it is a good thing to do. Like, what do I tell my kids who are disgusted with what they see and just tune it out because it's just so awful?
Well, one is to acknowledge that it is pretty awful. And that's not, it shouldn't be acceptable in our country. And it's incumbent on all of us to do something about it. You know, back over 2,000 years ago, the Roman politician, philosopher Cicero said, in a democracy, the most important office is that of citizen. And I think it's incumbent on everyone and young people to see that their future needs to involve becoming active as citizens, as leaders in business and medicine, whatever field, and getting involved. This country is only as good as we collectively make it. And it'll either get better or get worse. And so it's really incumbent on us to, again, lead by example, be involved by example. If kids see their parents involved in public affairs, volunteering for school events, serving on school boards or city councils, whatever, they get the message that that's what is expected of them as well. And until we can turn the tide on some of this other misconduct at the top, I think that's the best we can do.
Following on that, is there one, if you were President of the United States or God of the country, is there one thing or two things you do to just get rid of the polarity, like ranked choice voting, have a redistricting law that doesn't let people gerrymander? You know, is there one or two things that you do?
I might pull the plug on the internet. I can say things like that now because I'm not seeking in public office again. That's a very good question. You know, so much of it is the behavior of the human race. Winston Churchill said that democracy is the worst of all forms of government except for all the rest. And the problems we have in this country are pretty much the problems of human behavior and misbehavior, and that intolerance. And as I say, we have mechanisms now which reinforce intransigence and penalize compromise or reaching a common understanding. So I'd first, I guess, try to find a way to credit and to publicize those who are trying to be moderate voices. You know, Susan Collins is in trouble now because she voted for Mr. Kavanaugh to become Associate Justice. But she's been a tremendous senator. She's been a moderate voice. She's gone time after time to both sides and tried to bring them together. That's the kind of person that I think should be honored, hopefully reelected. But we need more of them. The people who get the attention are the firebrands on both sides. And to get that attention, you have to become more and more extreme. So maybe I'd pull the plug on television too. It's a good question. Jack was my next door neighbor growing up. He had a field out of his backyard called Square Park. And every swear word I learned it to the older boys at Square Park. And they came in very handy in the political debates, so I appreciate that.
I love your politics. I think you're an awesome politician.
Let's stop right there.
What accomplishment are you most proud of and why?
Well, Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia said of the 17,000 votes he cast in the Senate, the most important was on the Iraq War resolution. And I'm proud that I voted against that. I think it was the right thing to do then. Now everybody who's running for president is claiming that they were wrong to have voted for it. But back then it was not the popular position to take. Closer to home, I'm proudest of all-day kindergarten, free kindergarten. We were told at the beginning, schools won't want it, they can't accommodate it. We had 99.7% participation among school districts the very first year. We should have early childhood or pre-kindergarten for 4-year-olds. But unfortunately, we got caught in a political tangle, and we were able to expand it somewhat, but it really ought to be universal, or at least available universally to parents who can decide for themselves whether they want to send their child to a qualified child care facility, if there are any in their communities, then a lot where they're not, or whether they want to go to a program run by one of the schools. But education is the whole show. I mean, it's been our forte and the strength in the past, and now the challenge for us to assimilate all the different elements of our society and educate everybody so they can be productive citizens. If they are, we'll be successful. If they're not, we won't.
And I'm wondering if you could share more about your sort of like the conversation around your grandmother or your mother, whoever gave the scholarships for those Blake students in the 60s to join the school community. And that's a moment to me of moral courage. So I'm wondering if you can talk about what that was like for your family to kind of advocate for that type of integration and community here at Blake.
An all-white school was so normal that 3 scholarships, one for one boy in the freshman class, one in the sophomore, one in the junior. It was considered unusual. I remember being proud of my grandmother for doing it. My father was on the Blake Board of Trustees then. I think he was involved. I think they were starting to recognize that terrible imbalance, although I don't think they really saw it in the light it would be seen today. But long overdue and just a tiny beginning, but I think Blake's diversity now is where it needs to be. Maybe it should be more. I don't follow the current tracking, but it's 20% of Minnesota by the year 2020 will be people of color. And if you read the story this last week in the Star Tribune about Worthington, Minnesota, you see some of the just extreme difficulty that some of the particularly older generation has, who grew up in all-white cities, towns throughout Minnesota that have accepted people of color. When in fact, on the other hand, the economics of Worthington would collapse if they weren't all working there, most of them in the meat processing plant, to generate the income and for the benefit of them and everybody else. I mean, it's just a very petty and narrow-minded view of the world, and it comes in part from not being together from early on. I love going to kindergartens, first grade, and seeing kids of all different colors holding hands and singing songs together. And I remember leaving one in elementary school when I was a senator, and I turned to my staffers and said, we could just lower the voting age to 5, I might win another election. And she looked at me and she said, it would be close.
Hi everyone, I'm Kenneth Sangido and I have a second grader here. My question to you is, how happy are you to see Blake diverse, and does that play into your decision to have a multicultural or multiracial leadership as a senator and as a governor?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. How popular?
How happy are you now to see Blake diverse, and does that play into your decision to have a multicultural and as a senator and as a governor in your leadership?
Well, I'm much happier for Minnesota and for this country. I think we're still facing the challenge of how do we assimilate everybody, how do we be receptive, how do we reach people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different educations. Who was it who told me at the Wellstone School in St. Paul? Somebody here told me that. These are young people who come to school who 18, 19 years old, haven't been in school, places like Somalia for years. And they're kids who are, say, 5th and 6th grade have never been to school. So, and here we are probably still predominantly in the social service area and the education area, white professionals. who are needing to learn and are, in most cases, are really trying to learn how to be more responsive. And so I think the challenges are there, but again, our success depends on our ability to integrate people into our mainstream. And, you know, the number one complaint I've heard from businesses before I left, and it's continued, is they can't find workers to fill the jobs that are available. That's not going to happen solely with white middle-class families. It needs to happen with people of all backgrounds and colors. It needs to happen with immigrants coming into the state. And we need to see that as a virtue and as part of our lifeblood. But we're still away from that understanding. But it's better than when I was growing up. Was, you know, diversity training was teaching the Germans to get along with the Scandinavians.
Governor Dayton.
Yes.
Michelle Horvitz, class of 98, congrats, Kelly, and 2 young children in the lower school. Your last answer was a perfect segue to my question, which is, although all of us are very grateful for the education that we had here at Blake, and I'm sure 99% of the alumni in this room went to a great 4-year college. The education system is changing, the silver tsunami, where companies can't find people to fill jobs, especially in the trades. And there are just a ton of 2-year colleges, community colleges. I'm just curious, as our state diversifies, as education becomes more expensive, what are your thoughts on this type of career pathway, trade schools, alternative ways of making a living, earning a job, and being able to support your family?
Well, I was, in 1975, 76, I was a legislative aide to then Senator Walter Mondale, and education was one of my areas. And back then, student aid for college was 1/3 grants, 1/3 loans, and 1/3 college work study. Last time I looked, which was about 10 years ago, it was 2% college work study, 18% grants, the most low income, and 80% loans, which meant for most families, particularly middle income and other families of that ilk, college tuition was loans, loans, and more loans. So I said, my generation tells the younger generation that their education is important, which it is. They should get as much of it as possible because it'll benefit them, benefit society, but we're not going to help you pay for it. And then, by the way, and this is my best applause line with young people, I said, we're going to be asking, my generation is going to ask you to support us in our retirement in the style in which we've become accustomed. You're going to tell us to go get ourselves a loan. So I mean, yes, we need to make it affordable. We need to make it accessible to everybody, and we need to get people coming out of high school who are ready to learn at the college level so they can become skilled. Now, not everybody needs to go to college to get that. Machinists, people now in the technology of these machines and tools and everything else, it's computerized. I mean, it's very precise. So I mean, it's something that people can learn different skills, but they need to learn skills.
If we could, one more time, honor Kelly, George, and Governor Dayton.